So in this question, we have a 60-year-old immigrant coming in for follow-up, has a long-term condition that resulted in flaccid paralysis and atrophy of both of his legs. He is not vaccinated, and when he was a child, he was ill for a short period, and afterwards he developed paralysis. So exam shows 0 for patellar reflexes bilaterally, but sensation is intact. What area of the spinal cord is impaired? A is dorsal horn, B is dorsal column, C is anterior horn, and D is corticospinal tract. So I'll let you answer the question and then I'll explain. Okay, so the answer is going to be anterior horn, C. So for C, we have anterior horn, so it's going to control the motor aspect of function. So it controls your ability to contract your muscles. So poliovirus, which this question is talking about, is transmitted through the fecal-oral route. And when you have your motor function impaired, it's going to cause paralysis like this patient has. And specifically, it's going to be flaccid paralysis when the anterior horn is involved. And so when sensory is maintained in the other answer choice, so this is going to be the dorsal column. So essentially the sensory parts, like so detecting touch to your hand is going to be processed by your dorsal column, versus motor, the ability to control your hand and grasp something, is going to be controlled by the anterior horn. Dorsal is the same thing as posterior. So dorsal and posterior are synonymous. So dorsal horn controls sensation at a specific dermatome. And then the final answer choice, which was corticospinal tract, results in spastic paralysis. So remember, spastic paralysis is just a paralysis where you can't use, you've lost function of your muscle because it's just contracted too much. So it's essentially the opposite of flaccid paralysis. And so in this case, you're going to have increased reflexes. Remember that in this problem we had flaccid paralysis, so the reflexes, specifically the patellar reflexes, were 0. And remember that for reflexes, it's on a scale of 0 to 4. So 0 being absent reflexes, 1 being diminished reflexes, 2 is normal, 3 is increased reflexes, so hyperreflexia, and then finally 4 is sustained contraction. So in this case, we would have above 2, so it'd be 3 or 4 because it'd be a spastic paralysis. So you'd end up seeing hyperreflexia in this question versus the 0 that we saw for this patient. And so in general, the CNS helps control reflexes. So since this is a CNS tract from the brain, then if you have impairment of this tract, you're going to result in a system where reflexes are going to be increased, because usually the brain helps lower reflexes, so it's at a consistent 2. But if you have this impaired, now there's nothing to essentially put on the brakes to the reflex, so it's going to increase and thus cause hyperreflexia. So for this question, it was really looking at your ability to determine what is what in terms of function of the different parts of the spinal cord. So the 60-year-old immigrant is just hinting at the fact that this patient probably didn't have adequate healthcare and adequate vaccination, and that's confirmed right here. But anytime, even if they didn't say this part, it's kind of inferred, and that's what they're cluing you into, that you should have this on your differential, that this patient might not have gotten vaccinated. And so what that's going to lead you to believe is if they're not vaccinated, then they potentially could have gotten polio, which is also clued when they say that the patient was ill for a short period of time, probably by a virus. And then finally, they give you the exam findings associated with a flaccid paralysis for this patient, which is going to be the 0 for the patellar reflexes, but sensation is still intact, showing you that the dorsal column is still intact. So it's going to be the impairment of the anterior horn, and that's how you answer this question. So I hope that helped, and thanks for watching.